It's about to get interesting, so subscribe and hit like so you don't miss the top content.
5 years, 5 long years have passed since the day when my life split into before and after. I remember every moment, every detail, as if it happened yesterday. She and I were together for 10 years, making plans, dreaming, believing that we could overcome everything. But in one moment, everything fell apart. She left. She didn't just leave. She betrayed me with someone I thought was my friend. It was so sudden, so painful. I couldn't even find the words. I just left. I left everything, our home, our town, our country. America became my refuge, a place where I tried to start over. I settled in a small town in Northern California. Everything was different here. The nature, the people, the rhythm of life. I found a job at the local library, a quiet and peaceful place where I could hide from the world. I lived like in a fog, day by day, month by month. There was no joy or sorrow, only emptiness. I didn't want to see anyone, talk to anyone. My friends tried to contact me, but I ignored their calls and messages. I didn't want to remember the past. But the past has a way of coming back. It happened on one of those ordinary days when I was beginning to think I could live like this forever. I was sitting in my small apartment, drinking coffee and looking out the window at the rain that was falling for the third day in a row. Suddenly, the phone rang. I didn't immediately realize what was happening. The call was so unexpected that I didn't even immediately realize where the phone was. When I finally found it, I saw an unknown number. I wanted to ignore it, but something made me answer it. It was her voice, the same one I hadn't heard in 5 years. She said my name, and the world around me stopped. I couldn't breathe. I couldn't think. She was saying something, but I couldn't understand the words. Her voice sounded like she was right here beside me. I felt my heart start to beat faster, the blood rushing to my temples. I wanted to hang up, but I couldn't. I listened. She said she wanted to see me, that she needed to talk, that she realized she had no right to ask me for anything, but she hoped I would listen to her. I didn't know what to say. I didn't know what to feel. All I could do was remain silent. She kept talking, her voice shaking. She said that she had been thinking about me all this time, that she realizes how badly she made a mistake, that she wanted to make it right. I don't know how long it was before I finally managed to get a word out. I said I'd think about it. That was all I could say. I hung up the phone and sat on the floor. My hands were shaking and tears were in my eyes. I hadn't cried in 5 years, but now the tears were flowing on their own. I didn't know what to do. I didn't know what to feel. All I knew was that my life had changed again, and I wasn't ready for it. I was up all night. Her voice echoed in my head like a haunting melody that was impossible to get rid of. I tried to figure out what she was trying to accomplish. Why had she called? Why now? 5 years later, I went over everything she'd said, every word, every intonation. She sounded sincere, but I couldn't trust her anymore. Trust was what she destroyed the day she left, and yet her voice awakened something in me that I'd buried long ago, something I didn't want to feel. The next morning, I went to work as usual, but it was different. I couldn't concentrate. The books that I usually laid out with such care now seemed like just pieces of paper. People who came into the library spoke to me, but I could barely hear them. My thoughts were far away. I caught myself replaying her words over and over in my head. She wanted to meet. She wanted to talk. But about what? About how she ruined our lives. About how she chose someone else. Or maybe she wanted to apologize. But apologies didn't mean anything anymore. Too much time had passed. By the end of the day, I realized I couldn't go on like this any longer. I had to make a decision. Either I meet with her and listen to what she had to say, or I close this chapter of my life forever. But how do I close something that still haunts me? How do I forget the person who has been a part of me for so many years? I knew that if I didn't meet her, I would always wonder, what if? What if she really has changed? What if she has something important to say? That evening, I dialed her number. My fingers trembled as I pressed the buttons. She answered almost immediately, as if she had been expecting my call. I told her I agreed to meet. She offered to come to my place, my town. I didn't ask how she knew where I lived. Perhaps she found me through mutual acquaintances. Maybe she'd been following me all along. I didn't care. I told her I was expecting her on Saturday. The waiting was excruciating. Every day seemed like an eternity. I tried to go about my business, but everything around me reminded me of her. Even the smell of the coffee I drank every morning reminded me of the days when we were together. I caught myself remembering our conversations, our laughter, our dreams, but then I would remember how it ended. and the pain would return with renewed vigor. When Saturday came, I woke up early. I couldn't eat. I couldn't drink. I just Saturday and waited. She was supposed to arrive by noon. I looked at the clock, and every minute seemed like torture. Finally, I heard a knock on the door. My heart raced. I slowly walked to the door, grabbed the handle and opened it. She stood on the threshold, just as I remembered her, and yet completely different. Her hair was shorter. Her eyes seemed tired. She was wearing a simple dress and holding a small bag. We looked at each other for a few seconds without saying a word. Then she smiled, but it was a sad smile. I stepped to the side to let her in. She entered my apartment. Looking around, I could see her eyes sliding over the walls, the books, everything around me. She said everything looked just as she'd imagined. I didn't respond. I didn't know what to say. We sat her down at the table, and there was silence. She looked at me, and I could feel her gaze penetrating my soul. Finally, she spoke. She said that she knew she had no right to ask me for anything, that she realized how much she had hurt me, but she wanted me to know that all this time she had been thinking about me. She said that her life after we broke up was empty, that she tried to find happiness with the man she left with, but it didn't work out. She said she realized she'd made a mistake, that she had lost the most important thing in her life, me. I listened to her, but I couldn't believe my ears. Everything she said sounded like a script from some movie. But it was real. She was here, in front of me, and her words were real. I felt something inside of me start to move, something I had buried long ago, but I couldn't let myself open up to her again. I couldn't trust again. I told her I didn't know what to say to her, that too much time had passed, and too much pain had been between us. She nodded as if she expected that. She said she didn't expect me to forgive her. She just wanted me to know the truth, to let me know that she was sorry, and that she still loved me. Her words hung in the air. I felt my heart clench. I wanted to say something, but the words stuck in my throat. We sat in silence, and only the ticking of the clock broke the silence. Finally, she stood up and said she was going to go. She didn't want to bother me anymore. She just wanted me to know. When she left, I was alone. I sat at my desk and stared at the door she had just closed behind her. I felt something inside of me start to change, something that I couldn't stop. I didn't know what was going to happen next, but I did know one thing. Her words had changed everything. After she left, I sat in silence for a long time, trying to make sense of everything that had happened. Her words, her voice, her presence, all of it had left a deep imprint on me. I felt as if someone had opened an old wound that I thought had healed, but now I realized that it had never healed. It had simply been covered up with a layer of time, habits, and attempts to forget. And now that it was uncovered again, the pain returned with renewed vigor. I couldn't stay in the apartment. I needed to get out, to get some air, to feel something other than this heaviness inside. I threw on my jacket and went outside. The rain had stopped, but the sky was still covered in gray clouds. I walked down the deserted streets, not knowing where I was going. My feet carried me forward, and my thoughts were all over the same thing: her words, her face, her voice. I reached the park, which was on the outskirts of the city. It was a quiet, secluded place where I often went when I wanted to be alone. I sat down on a bench under an old oak tree and closed my eyes. The wind rustled the leaves, and somewhere in the distance I could hear a dog barking. I tried to calm down, but her words kept echoing in my head. She said she still loved me. She said she was sorry. But what did that change? Was it going to bring back the years we lost? Could it erase the pain I'd felt all this time? I sat there for maybe an hour, maybe more. Time lost its meaning. I thought about what would happen next. Could I let her back into my life again? Could I risk trusting her again? Or would it be a mistake that would destroy everything I had built over the years? I didn't know the answers. I only felt one thing: whatever I decided would change everything. When I got home, it was already dark. I turned on the light and saw her bag lying on the table. She'd forgotten it. I went over and picked it up. It was a simple cloth bag, but it was filled with something heavy. I opened it and saw an old photograph. It was of us younger, happier. We were standing on the beach with our arms around each other and laughing. I remembered that day. It was a long time ago, before everything went wrong. I held the picture in my hands and felt something inside me clench. I put the picture on the table and sat her down. I couldn't take my eyes off of it. It was like a window to the past, to the days when we were happy. But that past was so far away, so out of reach. I realized I couldn't bring it back. but maybe I could try to build something new, something that would be different, but still connected to what was. I picked up my phone and dialed her number. She answered almost immediately, as if she had been waiting for my call. I told her she'd forgotten her bag. She laughed, but it was a sad laugh. She said she didn't mean to leave it behind, but she must have accidentally forgotten it. I said I could return it. She suggested we meet tomorrow at a cafe downtown. I agreed. The next morning, I woke up with a feeling I couldn't describe. It was a mixture of anxiety, hope, and fear. I didn't know what was going to happen next, but I knew I had to go to this meeting. I got dressed, grabbed her bag, and walked out of the house. The cafe was a small, cozy place with wooden tables and the smell of freshly brewed coffee. She was already sitting at a table by the window. When I walked in, she smiled at me. I walked over and sat across from her. We ordered coffee and sat in silence until the waiter brought our drinks. She was the first to break the silence. She said she was glad I had come. I nodded but didn't say anything. I felt I had to be careful. I didn't want to open my heart again without knowing what would happen next. She said she understood that I might not be ready to forgive her, but she wanted me to know that she was willing to do anything to earn my trust again. I looked at her and felt something inside me begin to melt. I wanted to be strong, wanted to protect myself, but her words, her eyes, her voice, all of it made me feel what I'd been suppressing for so long. I said I didn't know if I could trust her again, but I also said that I might be willing to try. She smiled, and there was hope in her eyes. We sat and talked for a long time, about the past, about the present, about the future. I didn't know what would happen next, but I knew one thing: her words changed everything, and now I had to decide what I would do with that change. We met in that cafe a few more times. At first, they were cautious conversations, full of reticence and pauses, but each time we began to talk more deeply. She told me about her life after our separation, about how she tried to find herself, but all the time she felt that she had lost something. I listened, but I wasn't in a hurry to share my feelings. I was still afraid to open up to her completely, but something inside me was slowly changing. Her sincerity, her willingness to admit her mistakes, all this made me think that maybe we still had a chance. One evening, after another meeting, she suggested we go for a walk. We left the cafe and walked through the quiet streets of the city. It was late and there was hardly anyone around. We walked in silence, but the silence was different, not as tense as before. Then she stopped and said there was something she had to tell me, something she had been hiding all this time. I felt my heart freeze. I didn't know what to expect, but her tone was so serious that I realized it was going to be something important. She looked at me, and I saw fear in her eyes. She said she was afraid that after I knew the truth, I wouldn't want to see her again, but she couldn't stay silent any longer. She said she had to be honest with me if we were going to move on. I nodded, though my insides clenched. I was ready to hear whatever she had to say, but I was afraid of it at the same time. She took my hand and told me that after we broke up, she discovered she was pregnant. My baby. The world around me stopped. I couldn't breathe. I couldn't think. I stared at her, trying to see if I misheard her. She said she didn't tell me then because she was afraid. She thought I wouldn't want anything to do with her after she betrayed me. She decided to handle things on her own, but a few months later, she lost the baby. It was the hardest time of her life. She said she always blamed herself for not telling me then, that I never knew we could have had a child. I stood there looking at her, not knowing what to say. My mind was in chaos. I felt anger, hurt, regret, but most of all, devastation. I thought about the fact that we could have had a child, about how I could have been a father, but that would never happen now, and I didn't even know it all this time. She was crying, and her tears brought me back to reality. I hugged her, even though I didn't know why. Maybe because she was the only person who could understand my pain. We stood like that, embraced, in the middle of the empty street, and I felt something inside me break. When we finally separated, she looked at me and said she understood if I didn't want to see her again. She said she didn't expect me to forgive her, but she wanted me to know the truth, so we wouldn't have any more secrets. I didn't know what to say. I felt like my life had been turned upside down again, but this time, I couldn't just walk away. I couldn't just close that door, because I knew now that we had something more than just our love. We had a loss that bound us together forever. I said, I need time. She nodded as if she expected it. We walked back to the cafe, but this time the silence between us was different. It was filled with everything we hadn't said. Everything we'd lost and everything we could possibly still find. When we said goodbye, I went home, but I couldn't sleep. I thought about what she had said, that we could have had a baby, about how I never found out, and that now that I knew the truth, I had to decide what to do next. Her words changed everything, and now I had to decide if I could live with it. It had been weeks since the night she told me the truth. Those weeks had been filled with thinking, doubting, and trying to understand how I felt. I couldn't just pick up and forget what I had learned. It was like a wound that hurt every time I thought about it, but at the same time, I began to realize that her confession wasn't just about the past, it was about us, about what we'd lost and what we could probably still find. We continued to see each other. First it was short conversations, then longer ones. We talked about what was, what could have been, and what could be. I couldn't just forgive her, that would be too easy, but I began to realize that her pain was no less than mine. She had lived with this secret all these years, and it was destroying her from the inside out. Now that the truth was out, we both had to decide what to do next. One evening, we were sitting in the same cafe where it all started. She looked at me, and in her eyes, I saw something I hadn't seen before: hope. She said she understood if I couldn't be with her again, but she also said she wanted to try to start over, not like before, but in a different way, with everything we've had and everything we've lost. I was silent for a long time, looking at her. I thought about how much pain we had caused each other, but I also thought about all the good things that had happened between us, about the moments when we were happy, about the dreams we built together, and I realized that despite everything that had happened, I still felt something for her, something that hadn't gone away, even after all these years. I took her hand and told her I was willing to give it a try, not because I was oblivious to the pain, but because I realized we had both changed. We'd both been through hell, and maybe that was what gave us a chance to start over, not like before, but with the realization that we were no longer the same people we used to be. She smiled, and tears appeared in her eyes, but they were tears of relief. We sat there like that, holding hands, and I could feel something inside of me begin to change. It wasn't an instant healing. It was the beginning of a long journey, but I knew it was a journey worth taking. Right now, we're still together. We're not trying to bring back the past. We're building something new, something that is based on truth, on understanding, and on a willingness to forgive. We know it won't be an easy road, but we're willing to walk it together, because her words changed everything, and now we both realize that sometimes the hardest thing is not to close the door to the past, but to open it and step into the future.